Hey guys, it's Samuel Larsen here, and there are some elements that are nearly universal to successful e-commerce products. Now, what everybody always gets stuck on is the tactical level. So this is not about the individual products. It's about the principles behind those products and what kind of products generally are well suited for e-commerce. And there are a wide variety of winning e-commerce products, but there are some universal elements to that I see over and over again in successful products. I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, analyzing our 7 and 8 figure clients, seeing what works for them, not only on the product level, but product presentation level and how those come together to form a successful e-commerce brand or store. Now, product is not everything by any means. It's a part of it. But there are 6 things that I've come across on the product level that seem to be nearly universal on the successful products. And I'd say they do radically improve the success of your offer if you have this. You don't have to have all of them, and not many products like that really fit all of these categories. However, the more you have them and the better you have them, the better off you are. Now, in the end, I will also share my ideal e-commerce business and how that looks like. I will share an example, but also I'll talk about the other side to give you a full perspective, because we are kind of going on the product hype here. And then it's important to round up these, because oftentimes it is more subtle than people let it out to be. So I'm going to try to bring that 360 perspective to not only give you the knowledge about one side, but also that you could argue the other side just as well. But to begin with, if you haven't already subscribed, but you've watched a video or two already, subscribe, because otherwise you're going to miss out on the future videos. I have a goal of making every video better than the last one, so things will just improve from here, and we're really working hard to provide as much video value here as possible and do it completely for free. Okay, so let's jump into this one. All right, we're here on the screen share. So the 6 elements of a winning e-commerce product. Let's go. First of all, it can be differentiated. Now, there's a huge misconception here right off the bat. Differentiable means that it can be differentiated, not that it is automatically differentiated. So if you look at the industries like, let's say, skincare, everything in skincare has probably been invented, more or less. However, you can always take unique angles to skincare. Let's say you are providing some kind of unique herb or some kind of unique way of positioning this. And we're going to go into these different elements and ways here. But it is about providing value beyond the features. And here, a few different things. So if you already have a brand, this product needs to be able to align with that brand identity. So let's say you are, for example, a vegan brand. You couldn't go against that brand with your product. Otherwise, it is just confusing and it's not going to work on your portfolio. So there you will have those kind of limits if you are already an existing store, at least on that store level. So you cannot differentiate it against your store. That is first limitation. But here we start to go into this a bit more in depth. So for the product to be differentiated, it needs to have clear benefits. And that means that you're not just listing the features, and you are providing these clear benefits to the target market. And that's a key thing there. So, for example, you don't have to differentiate on a product level if you can differentiate on the targeting level. So let's jump into our first example. I'll go through this quickly. So this is a women's running shoe. Perceived uniqueness and clear benefits. So here their differentiator is wool, and not any wool, merino wool. So just looking at this page, how many times does merino appear here? It's a constant thing, and they're just hammering on that and the benefits of that wool. So that's their unique differentiator. I could say that this product would not sell for this price without this copy, without this positioning. There, you can also brag about it to your friends, like this is a unique type of wool. So there's a lot of additional value in that. And a great copywriter can go and pick this apart, make this into a really, really good thing. And here you can think of it as zooming in and zooming out and seeing which level you want to differentiate. You would probably want to go narrower than your first instincts usually tell you, because there's just so many people, and you can then specifically target those people. So you can be, at least in the beginning, the best in that very small niche. So don't be generic that the part is already taken. If you are selling a running shoe, you're not going to beat Nike or Adidas. You have to come up with something like this. So that's this example. Let's go into the next one. So here, perceived uniqueness. Now, there are multiple ways to make a product unique. And with product-based businesses, this is indeed actually easier than service-based businesses, because you can think of new angles of serving an untapped need, or come up with something that it differentiates your products on a product level. So people really don't buy products per se. They're always buying solutions to problems or pains. So keeping this in mind, you'll be better able to position this and not focus too much on the product. So a couple of examples here. First of all, is just the supplement industry, very competed. However, if, for example, you have an ingredient that others don't, so this is none of them, they have an NAD plus ingredient here that they are using to differentiate the product, and then the offer is about that particular ingredient. So it's the theme that we see throughout the page, just like on the other one. So there's the ingredient is mentioned constantly, and this way it is a way to escape the competition, at least a little bit. So if you have something like this, it's not a matter of having alternatives, although you always have an alternative to not take it or take something similar. But if you wanted this specific thing, then you would not have an alternative. Right? But it is very difficult to come up to an industry and revolutionize it, so to say. So what you can do is trying to provide pain relief, just doing it either quicker or in a way that is more inexpensive, cheaper. And this way, the customer just wants more benefits for faster/cheaper, aka more benefits for less cost, but there's time more money. And that way, you could come up with a brand that is all geared toward that. So here's Death Wish Coffee. Their whole idea is that this is the world's strongest coffee. Like, you're not gonna get a stronger coffee than this. And here, in some ways, it is differentiating from a very competitive industry, since you are having something that is unique. Like, the most popular coffee brands don't go and say, like, this is ridiculously powerful, it's like a death wish. So this can be a solution for some people. And to be frank, like, it is quite viral. Like you could show and share a Death Wish coffee with your friend, and it's a very manly brand as well. All right, now that you have those things locked down, you will need a defined audience. So for your product, the more specific you can be with the audience, the easier of a time you'll have. A good example could be beard brands. So just Rolla Shave Clubs, like they're clearly about men in their 30s that have a beard. Like that's a pretty straightforward thing. Now, of course, doesn't mean that like the men on their 20s and 40s would be completely turned off by this, but it's easier with the messaging because then you can have all the people be on that age group and be talking to that particular audience. So here, one way to differentiate it is to go with a defined audience. I'll share one more example with you regarding this. So this is a Boom by Cindy Joseph, and their thing here is pro-age cosmetic line. So what that means is it is for older women, not to fight their aging, rather to celebrate it. So that is differentiating on the audience level. All right, let's move on from differentiation. That's the first point to our second criteria. So you have a product, you will need traffic to that product. So here are the website channels and traffic sources you can choose from. You have direct search, social, referral, and email. And all of your traffic fits into these buckets. So 5 main channels with 8 traffic sources, because you also have these here. Now, many niches have issues with different traffic sources. So, for example, many products cannot be advertised on Facebook. And even if you have their perfect product, great offer, great presentation, you're not getting eyeballs to it, or you don't have a good strategy for getting eyeballs to it, then you're going to be limited in what you can do. And actually, the list here is quite a long one. So if you are thinking of different type of like creative products, like many of them will fit into these categories. And Google also has similar lists of different products and different types of ads you cannot run. So you will need to think of this strategy as well before you're really committing to anything there. I'd also say that on the other side of challenge are opportunities. So if you cannot make your crypto business, for example, successful on social or paid search, perhaps you could still do well on organic search. If you have certain strengths on certain traffic sources, let's say you're really good at SEO, you might actually want to pick a niche that is banned on social. You can pair this with your strengths and find a good niche or good product offering through that kind of elimination as well. Here the key thing is that you'd want to turn as much of your search and social traffic over time into direct, referral, and email traffic. So if you can think of this on a long-term basis, you'd want to also think what kind of products could get traffic from blogs, or in native advertising, for example, could go a bit drive viral on different platforms rather than just search and social. So that's the traffic source part. Very important to consider that as well with the products, because it's oftentimes it's an easy disqualifier. So you can disqualify your products without really having to think about it all that much if it doesn't fit this category. Now, next slide is very related to this one. You need to have healthy margins. Now, why healthy margins are so important? It is because you need to be able to afford your traffic. So if you are selling commodity that is price competed, you will always struggle. So for example, if you are selling electronics that are also available on Amazon, how are you going to be a better option than Amazon? What is your competitive advantage? So there you probably don't have any. So in that kind of case, it would not work. So let's think of this from the profit generation standpoint. And the key here is that the hidden value that you can enhance is the best. So how do we take something that is relatively inexpensive to create and make that a lot more valuable? So for example, a couple of good things could be resistance bands, for example. It's just plastic or like some kind of material that bends a little bit. And the value of that material that is coming cheaply from China can be a lot higher when you're using it to exercise. Another thing that comes to mind is yoga products. You can definitely differentiate those and make them appear a lot more valuable than they are in terms of just a physical mass of material. Beard oil is a good example, teeth whitening kits, those kinds of things. So anything that material-wise is cheap can be differentiated and provides a lot more value than the material itself. Now, having a product to generate healthy profit margins in terms of percentage is not enough. You also need to be able to buy that traffic, afford the traffic. And there's that saying that he who can pay most to acquire the customer wins. And there you are always competing on those ad placements with other advertisers. So in that way, it does make a lot of sense. And you need to be able to afford the traffic no matter what. So basic rule of thumb, very, very basic one, but a good one is to mark it up at least 3 times the production value. And it's known in the industry as the 3x rule. And it's a good rule to follow. So unless you can mark the product times at least 3 times the cost, you can pass on that product. So it's a bare minimum starting point, and the markup here needs to be high because the fixed and variable costs are otherwise eating away at your profits or eating all your profits and possibly putting you to the negative. But it's not really the percentages that matter only when it comes to profit margins. It's really about the actual dollar value. You don't just think of the 3x rule as a sole rule. You'd also want to have average order value of $50 and more. Because you're always going to have those ad costs, and it's just very difficult to make it up if you're not selling for high price or higher price, or at least like having some continuation to the product sales, which we'll also cover pretty soon. Okay, so that was our third pointer. Now let's move on to the fourth key criteria for a good product, and that is shippability. So how easy is the product to ship? How good of a shipping rates can you get for it? Do you have a good shipping strategy for that? So let's break this down a bit. So easy to ship would, for example, mean that you wouldn't necessarily want to sell furniture, because furniture has a very high shipping costs, and it's also one of those things where the owner would need to be there to receive it. So it's actually quite complicated of a shipment to make. It doesn't mean that you cannot successfully send furniture online like IKEA does it, but even for them, like, it's still quite complicated. Then the second thing there, easy to ship also means that it doesn't break when shipped, because returns are a hassle, but not only are they a hassle, they also create frustrated customers. So you wouldn't want to be, for example, in the plate business, selling some kind of things like complicated things that are heavy and you'd buy in bulk, that kind of thing. So that's about the shipping easiness, you want to think there in terms of what is your competitive advantage here. So if a product can be bought from Walmart or a place like that, for example, and it's not that differentiated, then you probably don't have a business. Then in terms of shipping rates, what does that mean? So if you are selling a fairly low value item, you would also need to have a low value shipping, because people are comparing at that point, like what is the price of the shipping compared to the item. And if the shipping rate is a lot higher than the item or relatively high compared to the item price, it's going to look expensive. And at that point, you're going to have a lot of drop-offs because of the shipping cost. And then lastly, good shipping strategy, meaning that you wouldn't, for example, want to sell vegetables or something that is very complicated and rots easily on shipping. So there you need to be able to get the product to the consumer in a time that they want. Pretty straightforward. And this is important for optimization standpoint as well. Here's a 2018 study. And the most important thing here is the shipping costs. So shipping taxes and fees are too high, then it will cause cart abandonments. And this is one of the key things that we try to tackle with optimization. But if they're high, they're high. So there's not a ton that can be done there in terms of psychology or like persuasion or optimization. They just are what they are. So you are better off tackling the problem on a source level and choosing the right kind of products for the e-commerce ecosystem. Now let's move on. Next up, we have creates happy customers. So if customers are perceiving a great value for money, then they are less likely to refund and less likely to leave a bad review, more likely to stay. Pretty straightforward stuff again, but often overlooked. So here, can we make them not only loyal, repeat customers, or even brand evangelists? I think this is even a general business principle. You generally want to serve happy people and be in touch with those kind of people with relatively low expectations, which low expectations or managed expectations will then also lead to lower returns, lower refunds, etc. There's a couple of categories, for example, that can communicate this principle pretty well. So, for example, smartwatches. This is a category where these are the top watches, but none of them even have most are like 4 stars, even though like Amazon is showing the most top rated first usually. So in these kind of cases, if it's not working perfectly, it is flawed from the customer's perspective. You wouldn't want to have that kind of high expectation to have a good smartwatch for like $50 or $20. So that's just a little bit extreme. Another example you could think of is, for example, earbuds. So there's a lot of high of a chance that there's some connectivity issues with all kinds of different smartphones, or they don't perfectly fit into your ear. Some things that are going wrong with this kind of thing. So there's just like way more things that can go wrong than that can go right. And that's an issue. Simultaneously, an example of a great product that could be satisfying people's expectations easily could be, for example, a supplement industry where you have a lot of placebo effect going on. So people are realizing gains or benefits without those benefits actually existing. And so those are a couple of the things that are good to keep in mind. And here, the goal with happy customers is obviously not just the reviews, but if we could have them come and buy again. So that would be an ideal thing, either with a subscription or repeat purchase. So there's a sale that would ideally lead to another sale, leading to another sale, or if that's not possible, leading to a referral or some kind of a viral element. So your sale for each sale would be definitely higher than 0, and ideally a lot higher than 0. So that's the creates happy customers principle. And lastly, before we go into the ideal business thing, let's think of that from a long-term perspective. So having a product, as we touched a little bit, that could be sold as a subscription would be a great thing, because then you are increasing that business value over time. So the more of a subscriber base you get, the more predictable things are. But also if you wanted to sell the store or sell the business at some point, that would be hugely valuable. So that's the subscription principle. And then available throughout the year. So something that doesn't have those peaks and valleys in demand, where you would then have the structure of the operations to match that. Ideally, you'd want a relatively stable demand throughout the week, throughout the year, even, and your business is running like clockwork at that point. So it's predictable, and it's something where you know that the orders are coming in. Something that is always more or less evergreen are health, wealth, and relationships. Those are the 3 things that everybody's looking to improve, and those are the kind of big 3 when it comes to evergreenness. So anything related to health is not likely to go down that much, at least rapidly, at least if it's a general thing. Wealth also, like everybody's always looking to improve their wealth, or at least their financial situation. They are not necessarily like looking to make the work or do the work, but it's something that they're interested in, and relationships share the same thing. Here, also you can think of it in terms of trends. So trends have a tendency to continue. So for example, fitness trend would likely always be a relatively stable trend, but then you might have subsections within that trend. So for example, if you look at CrossFit over the last few years, it's been steadily going down, except like a few peaks here and there. And this is an example of an industry that is generally like going down, and these trends have a tendency to continue. So might not be the smartest thing to go into right now. Unless something radical happens, you'll probably see this flat line here. Now, those are the slides. Now, what I want to emphasize here is that the product is very important, but you are still in a marketing business. So your product doesn't equal your business. Many people make this confusion, or have this confusion, that they think that product is what matters. But there are a whole lot of other elements that go into being a successful merchant than just the product. So if you think of it for a second, if you're just having a great product, you are still in risk of somebody else like copying that product or coming to do with alternatives. So in that way, product is never guaranteeing that you're going to be successful. It is about the marketing. And you might have a perfect product for that niche, but you cannot be successful until you accept that your business is a marketing business and the product is just the thing that you happen to sell. So if you think of, for example, any kind of big online store, it's really not about the products themselves. Sure, they're important, but there's things that are also important, and like as a whole, they're way more important. So if you think of Walmart, for example, like you have your suppliers, you have your shipping partners, and you have all that ecosystem supporting the whole operation. Then you have your distribution channels, you have the in-store, you have the deliveries, you have your customers, you have your customer relationships, you have your other revenue streams. Let's say you're Amazon, you have your supporting revenue streams, and then you have your customer acquisition. So channels, you have a cost of customer acquisitions that need to be reasonable in general, not just on a product level. Then you have other strategies to enhance the customer value, perhaps cloud subscriptions, all that stuff, and different monetization strategies. So on a beginner level, it looks like it's a pretty simple thing. You just pick the right product, you drive traffic to it, and then you succeed. But there's a whole lot to it rather than that. So the product on an e-commerce store or Shopify store is just the driver of that value proposition. It is an enabler of that value proposition, not the thing that makes it work. So it's not about the thing, it's the thing that sells the thing. And oftentimes that's a big mindset shift that needs to happen before merchants are successful. So if you're struggling with your customer acquisition and retention because you are just focused on the product, then you are in trouble. I think it's stemming from this idea of everybody's looking for a magic pill. No business is unique. Your product might be unique, but the underlying business is not. So if we start with that assumption, then no business is special, and the basic principles apply to every single one. Now, one thing I did promise in the beginning of the video, and thank you for watching this so far. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't so far, and like the video because you're obviously liking it. Now, what is the one business that I would start if I was to start a business? And here is a perfect example of that, who I think has a lot of those elements that we talked about. So here is Vistaprint. They are a B2B focused company that are selling these business assets. So like business cards, mugs, masks, any kind of things that you'd want to slap your logo on and send to a customer. Now, why is this good? From a perspective of differentiation, it's not really that special. There's a lot of these. However, what this store does compared to others because of its size, so it can provide pretty competitive pricing and also a lot of different types of items. And since it operates on a B2B basis, it has customers that are not as price sensitive as consumers would be, and that also have a repeat need. So if you bought business cards 3 years ago and you had a good experience, you're likely to buy them again from the same place. For businesses, it's more about saving time, and they don't necessarily question their expenses so much. If it works, it saves them time, they keep doing it. And the switching costs are just high because you already found a setup that works. So you have that mug with your logo, and right now you know how it looks like. So changing to that, from that to a different business is actually quite high. It's just not worth it to change it. Another thing to consider here is that it works traffic source wise, it works margins wise, as you had business customers. It works shippability wise, so these are fairly easy to ship. If you are, for example, shipping some items like business cards or even clothing bags, like that kind of thing, it's often pretty good. And these are not the kind of things that would be returned when it comes to clothing, for example, because you are buying them in bulk from multiple people. So that's pretty much that. Also, generally happy customers. You have a pretty good idea of what you're going to get from here. And it's also definitely evergreen as a business. You have this need throughout the year. Thank you very much for watching the video. Hope you had a good time. I had as well. And make sure to have as differentiated of a product as you can, with good source of traffic selection in terms of the sources, good margins that you can afford, shippability, try to create happy customers if you can, and then work on an evergreen niche, and you're going to do fantastic in e-commerce. Thank you very much. Make sure to subscribe and see you on the next video.